Imagine sailing into one of the coldest places on Earth, where the sun disappears for months, and the ocean itself slowly turns into solid ice. Now imagine becoming trapped there, hundreds of miles from civilization, with no way to escape, no rescue, no radio, no hope. For 129 men, this wasn't a nightmare. It was reality. In the summer of 1845, two of the most advanced ships in the British Royal Navy disappeared into the Arctic. Their mission seemed simple: find a route through the frozen north, connecting the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, a passage that could change world trade forever. The expedition carried enough food for years. The ships were reinforced with iron. They even had steam engines, cutting-edge technology for their time. Britain believed nothing could stop them. But within months, the Arctic would prove otherwise. Both ships vanished. Every officer, every sailor, every member of the expedition disappeared. No one returned home. For years, families waited for letters that never came. The Royal Navy launched one search after another. Dozens of rescue missions crossed the frozen wilderness. But they found almost nothing. Only scattered clues, a few graves, and a mystery that would haunt history for generations. This is the story of the Franklin expedition, one of history's greatest tales of exploration, survival, and tragedy. To understand why these men risked everything, we have to travel back to 19th century Britain. At the time, the British Empire ruled vast territories around the globe. Its navy dominated the seas. Its merchants crossed every ocean. But one prize remained just out of reach: the Northwest Passage. For centuries, explorers dreamed of discovering a sea route through the Arctic that connected Europe directly to Asia. Such a route would save months of travel around South America or Africa. Whoever controlled it could reshape global commerce. Many had tried. Many had failed. Ships became trapped in ice. Crews died from hunger, disease, and unbearable cold. Yet each failed expedition only strengthened Britain's determination. If anyone could conquer the Arctic, it would be the Royal Navy. Leading this ambitious mission was Sir John Franklin. By 1845, Franklin was 59 years old. He had already survived several Arctic expeditions. His courage was admired throughout Britain. But his earlier journeys had also revealed how unforgiving the Arctic could be. On one disastrous expedition decades earlier, his crew suffered such extreme starvation that some members reportedly resorted to eating leather from their boots just to stay alive. Franklin understood the dangers better than almost anyone. Still, he accepted the mission. For him, this would become the defining achievement of his career. The ships chosen for the expedition were HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Ironically, both had already proven themselves in another harsh environment. Years earlier, they had survived brutal voyages in Antarctica. Before leaving England, both ships underwent extensive modifications. Their wooden hulls were reinforced with thick iron plates. Steam engines were installed to help navigate through difficult waters. Special heating systems kept parts of the ships warm. Each vessel carried thousands of preserved food tins, libraries filled with books, scientific instruments, medical supplies, and enough provisions to last nearly 3 years. By the standards of the time, these ships represented the very best technology Britain could offer. Newspapers praised the expedition. Crowds gathered along the waterfront to watch the ships depart. Families waved goodbye. Many believed they were witnessing history. Few imagined it would be the last time anyone would ever see most of those men alive. On May 19, 1845, the expedition sailed from Greenhithe, England. A total of 129 officers and sailors stood aboard the two ships. Some were seasoned veterans. Others were young men eager for adventure. None of them knew they were sailing toward one of history's greatest mysteries. The voyage across the Atlantic went smoothly. By summer, the ships reached Greenland. Here, they took on fresh meat, water, and final supplies. Letters were written home. Crew members joked with local residents. Morale remained high. There was every reason to believe the expedition was unfolding exactly as planned. These would become the last confirmed messages many of the crew would ever send. In late July 1845, 2 European whaling ships spotted the Erebus and the Terror in Baffin Bay. The weather was calm. The crews appeared healthy. Everything seemed normal. The captains exchanged friendly greetings before continuing on their separate journeys. As the Franklin expedition sailed westward into Lancaster Sound, the 2 whaling ships watched them disappear beyond the horizon. No European eyewitness would ever see the expedition again. The Arctic swallowed them whole. What happened after that remained a mystery for years, but the ice had already begun to close around them. The Arctic is unlike any other place on Earth. It doesn't simply challenge explorers. It waits, patiently, silently, then traps them. By the autumn of 1846, the Erebus and the Terror had become locked in thick sea ice near King William Island. First, the crew remained confident. This wasn't entirely unexpected. Arctic expeditions often spent winters frozen in place, waiting for warmer weather to melt the ice. The ships were well supplied. Their heating systems still worked. There was food stored below deck. Many believed that when spring arrived, the ice would release them. But spring came, and nothing changed. The ice refused to let go. Instead of breaking apart, it tightened its grip. Summer passed. Then another winter arrived. The 2 ships remained prisoners of the frozen sea. As the months dragged on, the endless darkness of the Arctic winter settled over the expedition. For weeks at a time, the sun never rose above the horizon. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. Every breath formed crystals in the air. Outside the ships, the world became a silent desert of snow and ice stretching farther than the eye could see. Inside, life slowly changed. Routines that once gave the men purpose became harder to maintain. Food was carefully rationed. Coal was conserved. The crew continued scientific observations, hoping to preserve morale. They read books, performed plays, held church services, anything to keep hope alive. But hope becomes fragile when rescue never comes. One by one, small problems began to grow into serious dangers. Fresh food disappeared. Without enough vitamin C, some sailors likely developed scurvy, a disease that weakens the body, causes bleeding gums, and leaves even strong men exhausted. The preserved food they depended on also presented another possible danger. Many of the expedition's supplies had been packed rapidly before departure using lead-soldered tins. Modern research suggests that prolonged exposure to lead may have affected the crew's health, though historians continue to debate how significant this factor was. Whatever the exact cause, their physical condition steadily declined. Then, tragedy struck. On June 11, 1847, Sir John Franklin died. The expedition had lost its commander. No detailed account survives explaining exactly how he died. Illness, natural causes, or the cumulative effects of the harsh Arctic environment. No one knows for certain. Leadership passed to Captain Francis Crozier. Crozier was an experienced naval officer and Arctic explorer. He inherited an impossible situation. 2 ships trapped. More than 100 men stranded. No certainty that anyone even knew where they were. Still, he refused to surrender. The crews waited through another winter. Surely, the next summer would free the ships. But it never happened. The Arctic had won. By April of 1848, nearly 2 years after becoming trapped, the officers reached a heartbreaking decision. The ships would be abandoned. A written message was placed inside a metal cairn at Victory Point on King William Island. Today, it remains one of the most important historical documents ever recovered from the expedition. The note revealed 2 devastating facts. Sir John Franklin was dead, and 24 officers and crew members had already lost their lives. The remaining 105 survivors would leave the ships behind. Their destination lay hundreds of miles away. They hoped to reach the Back River on the Canadian mainland, where they might eventually find help. Imagine that journey. Every man pulled heavy sledges loaded with boats, food, and supplies. Not across smooth roads, but across broken sea ice, deep snow, and freezing wilderness. Many were already weak from illness and starvation. Some could barely walk. Yet they had no choice. To stay with the ships meant certain death. To leave meant gambling their lives against one of the harshest environments on Earth. No rescue party waited ahead. No settlements offered safety. Only endless ice and uncertainty. As the line of exhausted sailors disappeared across the frozen landscape, they left behind the Erebus and the Terror. The two ships that had carried Britain's greatest hopes now sat abandoned in complete silence. What happened to those 105 men after they marched away remains one of the darkest chapters in polar exploration. But they did not vanish without leaving clues. Scattered across the Arctic, future searchers would uncover haunting evidence that revealed just how desperate their final days had become. And some of those discoveries would shock the world. For years, Britain refused to believe the Franklin expedition was gone. Somewhere, people hoped the men were still alive. Perhaps they had found shelter. Perhaps they had reached another coastline. Perhaps rescue would come too late, but not too late. As the months turned into years, hope slowly gave way to determination. The British government offered substantial rewards for anyone who could find the missing expedition. Search ships sailed north. Overland expeditions crossed frozen rivers. Private explorers joined the hunt. What began as a rescue mission gradually became one of the largest search operations in the history of Arctic exploration. Each expedition returned with fragments of the story. A piece of equipment, a campsite, a discarded boat, but never the full answer. Then, an unexpected source began filling in the missing pieces. The Inuit people who lived in the Arctic had seen things the outside world had not. They spoke of strange wooden ships trapped in the ice. They described exhausted European men dragging heavy sleds across the frozen landscape. Some accounts told of sailors who appeared desperately weak. Others described abandoned camps and empty boats. For years, many European officials dismissed these accounts. But history would eventually prove that the Inuit had preserved some of the most valuable eyewitness testimony about the expedition's final months. As more evidence emerged, a heartbreaking picture began to take shape. The crew had not disappeared all at once. They had fought to survive, step by step, day by day, against impossible odds. Archaeologists later discovered human remains scattered across parts of King William Island. Many of the bones showed signs of cut marks. Researchers interpret these marks as evidence that, during the expedition's final stages, some survivors may have resorted to cannibalism after all other food sources were exhausted. This conclusion is supported by physical evidence, though it reflects an act of extreme desperation rather than certainty about every individual's experience. The revelation shocked Victorian Britain. The idea that disciplined Royal Navy sailors could face such conditions was almost unthinkable. Yet the Arctic has little regard for rank, training, or reputation. When survival becomes impossible, people make unimaginable choices. Scientists also continued investigating why the expedition had failed. Lead poisoning became one possible explanation. Some researchers suggested that lead from food tins or the ship's water systems may have impaired the crew's judgment and health. Others argued that lead exposure alone could not explain the disaster. Scurvy, starvation, pneumonia, tuberculosis, extreme cold, crushing exhaustion, isolation, each likely played a role. Rather than one single cause, historians generally believe the expedition was overwhelmed by a combination of hardships that fed into one another until escape became impossible. For more than a century and a half, the greatest mystery remained unsolved. Where were the ships? Had they sunk? Had the ice carried them away? Or were they still waiting beneath the Arctic waters? Then, technology accomplished what generations of explorers could not. In 2014, a Canadian-led search team discovered the wreck of HMS Erebus resting on the seabed. The discovery confirmed that at least one of the expedition's ships had survived far longer than many historians expected before sinking. 2 years later, Another remarkable discovery followed. HMS Terror was found in astonishing condition. Cold Arctic waters had preserved large portions of the ship. Cabins remained intact. Windows still stood in place. Artifacts rested where they had been left more than 170 years earlier. It was as though time itself had frozen. These discoveries transformed historians' understanding of the Franklin expedition. Yet even with both ships found, many questions remain unanswered. Exactly when did each vessel sink? How long did survivors continue living aboard before abandoning them? Did any crew members survive longer than previously believed? Some answers may still lie hidden beneath layers of Arctic mud and ice. Every new expedition uncovers another clue. Every artifact tells another small part of the story. But the Arctic still guards many of its secrets. Today, the Franklin expedition is remembered not simply because it ended in tragedy, but because it represents the extraordinary determination of people willing to risk everything in pursuit of discovery. Their story reminds us that the greatest obstacle was never the distance. It was nature itself, a force that could not be conquered by confidence, technology, or ambition alone. More than 170 years have passed since the Erebus and the Terror sailed into the Arctic. Their crews never returned home, but their story did, recovered one clue at a time, from frozen graves, weathered notes, Inuit memories, and finally, the silent ships resting beneath the sea. The Franklin expedition was not simply a mystery. It was a testament to human courage, to curiosity, and to the price that exploration sometimes demands. Even today, standing before the icy waters where the expedition disappeared, one question still echoes across the Arctic. How many secrets are still waiting beneath the ice?